Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Natalia Leigh and I'm an indie author and freelance editor, and I have a fun video for you today. I'm going to be sharing the top 5 mistakes that I catch frequently as a freelance editor. Now, these mistakes are going to be more story level writing, like developmental mistakes that I find, and not only mistakes, but just weaknesses that I catch in a lot of work. And then next week, I'm going to be sharing my top 5 like grammatical mistakes that I find while copy editing. So 2 different types of videos, but I hope that both will help you to kind of hone your writing, hone your storytelling abilities, and be able to edit your own books more successfully, I guess we could say. So I have a list here on my phone. We're just going to dive right into the top 5 writing mistakes I frequently see as a freelance editor. All right, let's get started. The first writing mistake that I find incredibly frequently, and I think most, if not all, writers struggle with this. I have also struggled with this, and it's something I constantly am striving to improve upon, and that is telling instead of showing. I find this everywhere all the time. Many writers do this, and I think it's totally normal if you find yourself telling instead of showing in your books. Now, personally, I find that I do a lot more telling than showing in my first drafts, because the first draft of any book that I write is me essentially telling myself the story, and then through many rounds of edits, I'm able to really hone the story and stop telling and start showing. So I'm going to share just a couple of tips I have for you guys so that you can show instead of tell in your novels. Okay, so 2 super basic tips that you can use in order to stop telling and start showing. The first is to really focus on your characters' 5 senses. Really explore what they can see, smell, touch, hear, and taste. Taste is a little bit of a tough one sometimes. Really try to put yourself inside of that character's body, inside of their experience, and move through the world with them. And then you're going to be able to better convey that world and that character's experiences within it to your readers. And then my second tip would be to try to express emotions via action. So for example, just the other day, I was super pissed off. I was in a really bad mood and I was angry. So how did that anger express itself? Slamming doors, raised voices, stomping around. And while I'm not proud of these behaviors, they're behaviors that all of us can see and recognize as anger. Something you could use for this, let's find it here, is, and this can come in handy for many different things, the Emotion Thesaurus. I've had this book for a while. My sister and my brother-in-law gave it to me. It's adorable. It's all chewed up at the top here because it was a Christmas gift, and their dog got into it and chewed it up a little bit. But if you're trying to work on showing versus telling, and you're really trying to express emotion via action, this could be an incredibly helpful book for you. So let's just briefly, I was just talking about anger. Let's briefly look up anger. Definition: strong displeasure or wrath, usually aroused by a perceived wrong. And then we have physical signals: sweating, sweeping arm gestures, a high chin, jerky head movements, glaring, a reddening in the face, stomping or stamping, I know that one well, a shaking or raised voice, yelling. So these are all ways to convey the anger that your character is feeling instead of just saying, Natalia is feeling angry, because that just completely removes readers from the story, and it makes them feel as if they're being told a story rather than being within the story and witnessing it for themselves. So again, if you're noticing a lot of telling versus showing within your stories, I don't think it's something to be super frustrated about or super like bummed out about, because a lot of us do it. A lot, if not most of us, struggle with show versus tell, but this book might come in handy. So I will have it linked down below if you're interested in picking up the Emotion Thesaurus for yourself. All right, moving on. Okay, the second writing mistake that I catch super frequently in clients' work, and again, something that I've struggled with, is a lack of setting description, or white room syndrome. White room syndrome essentially means that your character is without a setting around them. So they could essentially be standing in a white room, and readers wouldn't really be able to tell the difference between the castle at Hogwarts or the white room that your character is standing in. So you really get this white room syndrome when you're lacking setting and sensory description. I really am going to keep coming back to using your character's senses because it's one of the best ways to really ground them within their world and bring readers into your story. Personally, I find that I do most of my description work in later drafts of my novels. So for example, right now I am working on the 6th draft of Pistol Daisy, and will soon be working on the 3rd draft of Whiskey City, which are the first 2 books in my brand new Wild Western action adventure series. And in the 6th draft of Pistol Daisy, I find myself really working on sensory setting descriptions. For example, just yesterday I was looking up native plants and trees that would grow in the area where my character is traveling through, so that I can add little descriptions of the types of trees that she's seeing, the plants that she's touching, what those plants smell like, what this setting really looks like, and bringing that to life. But this is not something that I had in the very first draft. In the very first draft, my character Daisy was traveling through the dry, open plains, and that was it. Like, that was the only setting description I had. But as I build on this story, as I go back through consecutive rounds of edits, I'm able to really hone the details and build the world a bit more. So again, this is definitely something that I catch quite frequently in clients' work, and it's something that can easily be cleaned up in edits, and I actually find it to be really fun. The first draft sucks. I do not like writing the first draft of a new book, but I love editing it. I'm a freelance editor for a reason. I love editing because it's where I can start honing my craft and bringing in, it's kind of like the cherry on top. So again, I'm going to encourage you not to feel frustrated if you're kind of encountering this white room syndrome, because it's always something that can be fixed in edits. And something else that might help with this, because you can't really use an Emotion Thesaurus for your setting, something that I like doing is making Pinterest boards and like photo collages. So then if I'm writing within, let's say, a saloon, like Daisy, my main character Daisy, she goes into and out of saloons quite frequently in this book series. So if I'm struggling to kind of picture this saloon or what it would feel like to have Daisy there, what I would do, and what I have done in the past, is go on Pinterest and look up Wild West Saloon, Old Country Saloon, like whatever your keyword search may be. I look up those photos and then I save them into like a Pistol Daisy album. So then whenever I'm writing a scene within that saloon, I can easily look up those photos and even grab a few ideas for details, and that will make all the difference. Personally, I'm a very visual learner. I'm a very visual person. So being able to have those photographs in front of me while I'm writing and editing is incredibly helpful. So if you don't already have a Pinterest, I recommend that you start one for the book or the series that you're working on. You could use the photos in your series Bible, and I will have a video up on my series Bible and the program that I use for my series Bible very soon. But yeah, that helps me. And it's also a great way to procrastinate while also feeling like you're making progress in your writing. So Pinterest, my friends, find all the photos. Okay, moving on. This next mistake is more of like a craft one, and that is too many dialogue tags. I see this all over the place, and again, I think it's something that many writers do because we're really striving for clarity. In many instances, we want our readers to be able to perfectly picture everything that's going on in our heads, and dialogue tags are part of that. He said, she said, he said, she said, he said, she said. Like, it is so easy to kind of fall into that pattern and that rhythm, but you don't need all of those. The dialogue, the conversations that your characters have will flow so much better if you're able to remove some of those dialogue tags, because readers do not always need to be reminded after every single line of dialogue who is saying that. This will be influenced by how many characters are in a scene and how many characters are talking. Because if you have two characters speaking to one another, it's much easier to remove dialogue tags than it would be if you had 5 characters speaking to each other, because the larger the group of people conversing, the easier it is to get things confused. So you could certainly use more dialogue tags in that type of scene where a bunch of characters are speaking to one another at the same time. But if it's only a couple of characters talking, you can try to remove the bulk of those dialogue tags and either just, consistently keep it clear with your paragraph structure who is speaking, or you can use physical description. I don't want to eat that for lunch. Natalia flipped her hair in an annoying manner. That was a terrible example, but it's an example of how you can use a physical movement or a physical description to make clear who is speaking without needing to tag on a dialogue tag. And I'll also say, in addition to this, something that I notice especially new writers doing is trying to use stronger words than said or asked. So if you're constantly trying to switch it up, she sang, she growled, she snarled, she whispered, she snapped, you can certainly use these stronger and more unique dialogue tags in a situation and a scene that really calls for it, but you don't need to always be varying your dialogue tags. If you just say, Natalia said, or Natalia asked, or whatever your character's name is, my name is the first name that comes to mind, those dialogue tags will mostly become like background noise to your reader. They're not going to be paying that close of attention to your dialogue tags, so they can kind of glaze over them as they're reading. But if you are consistently using strong words versus, said or asked, if you're using these really unique and strong verbs for your dialogue tags, that's going to stand out a lot, and you don't want it to become overwhelming or clunky or annoying to your readers. So my tips, try to limit dialogue tags, and whenever you can, use the simplest dialogue tags you can. Said or asked are usually all you need, and you can always switch it up if the scene calls for it, but you don't need to vary it every single time. Just keep that in mind. All right, the fourth mistake that I often see is either accidental point of view shifts. I see people switch from third person limited to third person omniscient. I see people switching from third person to first person, vice versa. And then I also regularly see past present disagreement. So somebody will be writing in specifically past tense, and then suddenly they accidentally switch to present tense, and that can kind of bounce back and forth. And there are some situations where within a book you will be switching from past to present tense. For example, Pistol Daisy is present tense, but if Daisy is looking back on something that she previously did, or maybe something happened off camera that she's kind of conveying to the reader later on, then I might use a past tense narration, but that is, I'd say, quite rare. And mostly what I catch when I'm doing manuscript critiques and editing for clients is that accidental shift from past to present, or from third person limited to third person omniscient. It's a little bit more rare to switch from third person to first person. I mostly catch third person limited to third person omniscient, because especially when you're writing in third person, I think it can feel so distant for some writers that it's easy to slip into the heads of other characters. But I think that this is something that just comes in time. It's one of those things that you have to practice. It's one of those craft things that you just kind of have to hone and get used to. But it's definitely something I see frequently. So in your edits, while you're reading over your manuscript, make sure to keep an eye out for point of view agreement and tense agreement. You don't want to be switching back and forth all over the place. The last mistake that I regularly see, and this one I feel is the most difficult to correct out of the 5 that I've mentioned, is unclear direction for your characters or story and low stakes. And let me tell you what, I have a lot of experience with low stakes in my novels. It's something that I have consistently struggled with, and it's something that I am always working to improve. I've just always struggled. My stories have a tendency to kind of be like this. Like, my characters never really experience those damaging, terrible lows, and then the really exciting highs that you're kind of expecting from a story structure. So if this is you, I feel you. It's something that I struggle with and I work on as well. But definitely unclear direction, unclear motivation, and a lack of stakes. And through editing and through taking classes in editing, what I've learned is that you can typically, and especially if you're somebody who wants to traditionally publish, you really need to be thinking about this. You can typically find this lack of direction and lack of stakes even within a book summary or like a book blurb. So when I was learning and taking a class on editing queries and editing synopses for authors, this was something that was highly focused upon, because when I was editing queries during this class, I was consistently being given these queries that you could tell just within that blurb, like that very short summary of the book, that the author didn't really know what their own stakes were. They didn't have a very clear direction or a very strong like plot driving the character forward. And this one, unfortunately, I think is much more difficult to fix, because it's not simply on a like sentence structure level. It's not on a word or line level. It's the story. It is like the deep developmental backbone of the story that you're telling. And again, I feel ya if this is something that you struggle with, because it's something I struggle with, and it's something that I have to work on every single time I sit down to write a new book, or every single time I sit down to edit a book. So something that has helped me a lot, I don't have it with me right now, it's in the other room, but something that's helped me is using the Save the Cat Writes a Novel book by Jessica Brody. It has been incredibly helpful. I'll pop it up right here. You've probably seen the book cover if you're on like authortube or Writerly social media. That book has helped me a lot because it taught me how to break down like a typical story structure or a typical plot structure. And of course, your book does not have to follow the structure that this book details, but for somebody who struggles with direction, motivation, and stakes, that being me right here, it has been so helpful in learning how to structure a book, learning how to kind of throw my characters to the wolves, I guess you could say, or get them up in the tree and throw stones at them. I would recommend, if you're struggling with this, to not only study like other books, read books, take note of their plot structure, take note of kind of like the pacing, take note of the stakes and how much tension there is in a book. And of course, that's going to kind of vary depending on the structure or the depending on the genre that you're working within. But there have to be stakes. There has to be something that the character's working toward, and they have to have the chance to lose. You know, even if you're writing a contemporary romance, let's say, the stakes could be, is this character gonna get the girl or not? Are they gonna break up or are they gonna stay together? Are they going to get the date to the dance or aren't they? Those are stakes, you know, or it could be something on a greater, larger scale. You know, is the world going to be destroyed? Is an evil dictator going to take over? Is the character going to die? Like, there need to be stakes no matter what genre you're working within, and studying plot, reading as many books as you can, getting your hands on Save the Cat Writes a Novel. These are all things that can really help. And then I'm also going to say something that's helped me is writing more books. I have written 7 books, and I feel like I am finally, like at books 6 and 7, I am finally starting to get a handle on plot structure. But it took me 6 books to start really understanding how plot works, how tension works, how stakes work. So don't expect your book to be perfect and have like perfect pacing and high stakes and all this tension your very first time around, because it's something that I think just comes in time. It's something you gotta practice, and it's something you gotta learn. So if you have noticed any of these 5 things that I've mentioned within your own manuscripts, it's all good. We all make mistakes, and you can always work to correct it, either in edits or just through studying craft and writing more books. So thank you guys so much for joining me today for this video. It's always kind of fun to talk about like writing mistakes and how you can help correct those mistakes. And because I'm focusing so strongly on editing this year, I really want to make sure that I'm putting out content for you guys that's helping you edit your own work, because I love it. I love it so much. Speaking of editing, I have 3 editing clients today. I have a manuscript critique, a copy edit, and a sample edit I need to work on. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up so that I can get back to editing. But again, thank you guys so much for joining me today. If you have any other like common writing mistakes that you've noticed within your own writing, I'd love if you would leave it in the comments down below. I think it really helps to be kind of open with yourself and open with others, because that's the way that we learn. Again, I am not a perfect writer. I have made all of these mistakes that I talked about today. I have made, and I've had to work really hard to learn how to not make those mistakes anymore, because writing is something that you have to learn. And on top of that, storytelling is something that you have to learn. So at the end of this video, I just want to tell you, don't feel discouraged. If anything, I think it's exciting to have something to look for in edits and to like focus on something, because oftentimes you might be looking at your completed manuscript and not know what you need to do. You might not know what you need to correct or what you need to work on. So you could certainly look for these 5 things that I mentioned. Yeah. So I think that's it for today, and then I will be back next week with the top 5 grammatical errors that I catch while copy editing. These were more like writing and story-based mistakes, but I will be back very soon with grammatical mistakes. So look forward to that. Okay, my friends, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Happy writing, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!